Hello everyone and welcome back to the Premiership quarter. Today this is going to be my second video of previewing the trade period, going through all the recent updates and news, aside from the free agency signings, which I will mention as well before I get started, and seeing what sort of value each player and each team might have to give up and get in return for the players that want to leave their club and join their new ones. The players that I'm going to talk about are Charlie Curnow, Sam Flanders, Zach Merritt, with a bit of an update on him and his value given James Worpel's compensation pick has officially come in as an end of second round pick. We're going to be discussing Bailey Humphrey and the new rumours about him, and also a few more as well, so stay tuned for all those. But before we begin, I do want to get through all the new free agency signings that we do have. So the few that came in on day one on Friday, which as of recording was yesterday, were Tom de Koning and Jack Silvani from Carlton to St Kilda. They have netted Carlton with pick 9 and pick 19 as compensation for those two players. James Worpel has officially signed in at Geelong, and that netted Hawthorn an end of second round pick, which I was quite surprised at. I thought the contract would have been a bit bigger. Seems Geelong were able to get away with it, and clearly they gave him a nice little farm down there. So thank you to Simmons for that. Brody Myercheck has also officially announced he will be joining the Demons. I'm unsure as to whether they get a free agency compensation pick for that. I don't know if they do. Charlie Spargo, who's officially joined North Melbourne as a free agent, and Jacob Ware as well to Port Adelaide are all the ones so far. Before we do get into the trade predictions and all the value stuff, please make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Appreciate all the support on my last video. It did really well, so appreciate all the support as always. But let's get straight into it. So I want to start with a huge trade that I've been working on for a little bit. It involves 5 teams or 6 teams, I believe. Pick swaps, players, everything all involved. And we might as well get into it. So the deal essentially revolves around Charlie Curnow heading to Sydney, Christian Petracca heading up to Gold Coast, Sam Flanders heading to St Kilda, and then a few pieces in between with a lot of pick swaps involved as well. So might as well get straight into it, and what I've done is I've gone team by team and essentially broken down what they will get and what they will receive. So I'm going to start with Gold Coast, and they get Christian Petracca, James Rowbottom, Dan Butler, pick 26, 27 and 29 in this year's draft, as well as the Demons' future third round pick in next year, in exchange for Sam Flanders, Ben Ainsworth, Charlie Ballard, pick 6, 15 and 18 in this year's draft. In this, Gold Coast lose all their picks in this year's draft, move back to get more picks in exchange, but they also improve their players. So Christian Petracca fits this team a lot better than Sam Flanders. Petracca fits the team better because he's able to play mid-forward much more impactful than what Sam Flanders does. He can burst from a stoppage, and then he can also provide damage in front of the ball. He probably replaces a lot of what Bailey Humphrey was doing last year, given there are rumours he's going to leave, and I'll talk about him later as well, because what Carlton get in return for this deal could very well be used as well. I wouldn't be surprised if that's what happens whatsoever. I also wouldn't be surprised if Dan Butler continuously plays for Gold Coast. Whilst there hasn't been any media reports about it, I do know someone who has got a couple sources saying that Damien Hardwick wants to reunite with Butler, and given they're losing Connor Butterick to the Bulldogs and Malcolm Rosas Jr. to the Swans as well, which actually isn't involved in this trade, but it's just a simple pick swap, I think it's pretty obvious that he would be someone who is familiar with Hardwick's system and can play a role and fits well alongside there, and can help mentor the likes of Jake Rogers as well, who are coming through from the Gold Coast Academy. I think they trade out of their 3 first-round picks this year pretty much. If you consider James Rowbottom, he could very easily be involved for pick 15 in this year's draft. You use Flanders and pick 6 to trade up for Christian Petracca and a future third round pick, and then you use pick 18 to get 26, 27, 29 and Butler, as well as Charlie Ballard, who I think, given Gold Coast wanted to play Collins, Andrew, Jeffrey and then Newlands as their 4 main tools, I don't think there's any room anymore that is left for Ballard, and they picked up Oscar Adams in the mid-season draft last year, who was going to fill that role anyway. So I think for Gold Coast, they're pretty confident in what they're going to get this year. Moving on now though to Melbourne, they lose Christian Petracca, their second round pick in this year's draft, and a future third round pick. And then they get in Ben Ainsworth, Charlie Ballard, and that pick 6 from Gold Coast. I think given they traded away their first round pick in this year's draft, they'd want to continue to replenish that younger talent, and they'd want to potentially trade back in, and they essentially get their own pick in return anyway, because it's just one after their own, which is what they used to get to in last year's draft. They get Ben Ainsworth, who I think can play a similar role to what Petracca did, is more of a current midfielder in this day and age rather than what a Clayton Oliver will be, given I'm assuming they're trading him as well, which he might be involved later on. And then they get a key defender in Charlie Ballard, who I think is really good upside, and he replaces what Stephen May has done. I think they also need to move Harrison Petty down back, and then they can target potentially a midfielder to replace Oliver and Petracca, and can work alongside the likes of Harvey Langford, Jack Viney in the meantime, Caleb Windsor, who's been playing there, Colin Tolstrup as well they've got, and Xavier Lindsay, who they took in last year's draft as well. I think that sets up a really good midfield, and then you use the likes of Trent Rivers and Keziah Pickett to help strengthen it up in the meantime. And so I think for them, moving on for Petracca, getting 2 valuable players and a first round pick, I think is absolutely a great deal, even if they lose a later pick in this year's draft. So the next team that I want to talk about is Carlton, because they trade away Charlie Curnow in this situation. Everything I see for Carlton in return for Curnow has to be at least 2 first round picks and a player. I have mocked before that potentially they go for someone like Bailey Frisch from Melbourne, who could be on the outer given they're getting in Brody Myercheck, which has just been confirmed that I saw online. Potentially even an Ollie Florent that was talked about previously, but I think Will Hayward's a really solid player. He has been a really good piece for Sydney over the last few years, and I think then pick 11 and Sydney's future first will help. Pick 11 they could potentially use in a Bailey Humphrey trade alongside their own first round pick, and then Sydney's future first they're going to use to be able to get Cody Walker in next year's draft, given you're going to need at least 2 first round picks to match a bid in the new rules for the system. I think for Curnow, it's really hard to make a trade. Every Carlton fan is not going to agree with you, but I think for the most part, this deal suits every party. Now for the next team, it is Sydney. They get in Charlie Curnow, Jack Steele, and St Kilda's future third round pick in exchange for James Rowbottom, Will Hayward, their first round pick this year, and then their future first round pick next year. The deal essentially breaks down into James Rowbottom, who is a younger version of Jack Steele, and a future third round pick. I think if they want to contend for next year, he is absolutely a piece that they could go for. He fits well alongside Heaney, Warner, and Goulden as well in that midfield, and provides that defensive solution. And then Charlie Curnow they must get in because they need a key forward. They were going for Jamara. He seems to be going to Gold Coast, which is why they've feigned away from Charlie Curnow. And I think it's really important that they do that because it allows them potentially to move someone like Logan McDonald into defence. And I think that's something that they need because they need a key defender. I don't think having Tom McCartan and then Rampy and Blakey as your next 2 suits. They simply need a bigger body. And I think McDonald could very well trial that. They tried to move McCartan forward in his absence. It very much didn't work. I think they now need to go in the opposite direction and go even bigger down back. And someone like McDonald can do that when you've got McLean, Amadi, and Curnow up forward because they provide some actual winners in a contest. And I think that's what they lacked last year a lot. They don't need their first round pick this year because they're getting a player in Max King from their academy. Even though he used to be a first round pick, he probably isn't anymore. However, it's still a good young piece that they continue to use to replenish this list when Heaney potentially slowly fades out. The second last team in this is St Kilda. They trade in Sam Flanders. They get in pick 15 and pick 18. And then they trade out Jack Steele, Dan Butler, pick 8 in this year's draft, and a future third round pick. In essence, this revolves around getting Flanders and pick 15 for Dan Butler and pick 8. And then Jack Steele for pick 18 and a future third round pick, I think this works. They get a better player in Flanders, someone who fits their timeline probably a bit more as well and doesn't have those real injury problems. And then they also don't necessarily need that first round pick this year, given they're potentially getting something for Rowan Marshall, who I will mention later, and then also potentially a couple other pieces as well that they're looking to move around this year's and in the future as well, given what they want to do. I think for the most part, they get younger, and they also get a couple picks that they can use in a Marshall trade to get someone else, who I will talk about later, as I just mentioned. And then the last team that is involved in this deal is North Melbourne. They get in pick 8 and they trade out 2 second-round picks in 26 and 27 and a third in pick 46. The only reason they do this is Gold Coast need more picks to match bids, and then also North Melbourne traded out their first-round pick, and then now they trade back in to get a piece, potentially like Xavier Taylor, who is looking a seriously good not key defender, but medium-body defender in the ilk of Braden Maynard sort of player, who can really help play alongside that defensive system that is seriously lacking. So a few other players that I want to mention is, I'll start off with Bailey Humphrey, because I did mention him earlier before. There are rumours that he has met with multiple Victorian clubs. Collingwood and Melbourne are the two that are confirmed. Carlton is also interested, and Hawthorn could be a late potential in as well. They supposedly met with him earlier in the year, however, that I don't think has been confirmed. For a deal to get done, it's probably going to take at least one first-round pick and potentially a player or another first-round pick, because he has got super potential. He is very much in that ilk of your Jordan Tagoe or your Christian Petracca, where he's that real damage midfielder but can also play forward and can win a contest. Probably not to the levels of a Marcus Bontempelli or a Dustin Martin, but I think he can certainly reach those Christian Petracca levels. I wouldn't be surprised if that's his ceiling at all. And so a deal for him, if you're looking at Collingwood, I think it's really hard for them to get it done. I just don't think that they're willing to part ways with 2 future first round picks at all. And I don't think they get anything else really in value this off season to be able to trade on and get a first round pick that they can use with that and a future first. I just don't think it gets done with them. For Melbourne, I wouldn't be surprised if it's a deal including Christian Petracca, where it's Humphrey for Petracca and then there's more picks involved. That wouldn't surprise me whatsoever. With Hawthorn, I just don't think they can get it done this year, given what they're going to have to give up for Zach Merritt, which they're going to be very inclined to do, given he's more of a short-term fix and they want to win a flag more sooner rather than later. And then the one that I'm really interested in is Carlton, because it was shown on social media that he idolized Paddy Cripps growing up. And I think that given Carlton are going to lose Charlie Curnow this offseason, in my opinion, I think a first round pick that they get in for Curnow this year, and their own first round pick that they're going to want to use to trade back at least, I think gets involved with Gold Coast potentially to net them Bailey Humphrey. And I think he fits in perfectly for their future. You look at a midfield of Sam Walsh, Adam Chera, Jagger Smith, Cody Walker next year, and Bailey Humphrey. I think that really excites a lot of Carlton fans. And I think for Gold Coast, they'd absolutely take 2 first round picks for Bailey Humphrey. I think that probably isn't even the starting point. I think a first and then another pick would be a starting point. And if they get 2 first, I think they'd be willing to take it. If in this example, in the trade that I just mentioned, can't get pick 11, they do have pick 10. So 10 and 11 for Humphrey, I think would be an acceptable trade. Gold Coast could then use one of those 2 picks to then trade with like a team like Essendon, who might want another first round pick, and that potentially on trades to them getting a top 2 pick, potentially trading with West Coast or even Richmond to get Willem Dersma, which wouldn't surprise me given they want to pair them all up together. And that allows Gold Coast to secure even more points for this year's draft. And I think that allows Carlton to set up a really promising future in their midfield. And then they also get Harry Dean anyway, because I wouldn't be surprised if a late pick comes back, potentially like 26. I wouldn't be surprised if that deal gets done at all this off-season. Another player is Rowan Marshall to Geelong. There have been rumours that Geelong won't be trading their first-round pick this year, and St Kilda will be more looking like a first-round pick in the future, which, given this year's draft, doesn't surprise me. I still think that a player probably is going to be involved. I have heard rumblings of Sam De Koning potentially being on the outer, and St Kilda would absolutely want to pair him up with his brother, Tom De Koning, and I think that pairs a really good partnership with the likes of Callum Wilkie, Jack Silvani and Leaky Lid down back for St Kilda, and then also allows Geelong to contend now, given Sam De Koning's sort of been a bit on and off throughout his career since 2022, being played in the ruck, not really allowing him to develop as a key defender. I think that trade probably involves St Kilda giving up something extra on top of Marshall to get that done, but then maybe they get a late pick back in something like this year's draft. So it could be Marshall and, let's say in the trade that I did earlier, pick 18 for Sam de Koning, and then Geelong's second round pick. That allows St Kilda to get some points for Kai Fincher that they have in this year's draft as well. And I think for Geelong, it really fixes their biggest need, which is a rock roll. Because even though Blitzharves can do a really good job, we saw in the grand final how much they lacked that real big body in there to compete with the likes of Darcy Ford and Oscar McInerney, which isn't a lot in the first place. A couple other trades that have seemed to have popped up are, as I mentioned, Malcolm Rosas and Connor Butterick to Sydney and the Western Bulldogs, respectively. I don't think they really take too much to get done. Probably a third round pick, maybe even it could be like a third, and then you get a fourth in return. It's really not going to be too much for either of those teams to get it done. I don't mind Malcolm Rosas Jr. to the Swans, actually. I think he's a pretty good piece, and I'm surprised the Suns are letting him go, and the Swans can really utilise a player like him. And then Connor Butterick just sort of has a bit of versatility and sort of improves probably lower six of the Bulldogs' best 23. Cal Archie has officially nominated Adelaide as his choice of preference for 2026 as well. That deal probably revolves around a first rounder going to Brisbane and then maybe a later pick heading back to Adelaide. Whether it's a first round pick in this year's draft, I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if a first round pick. And then also Brandon Starcevich has confirmed that he will be heading off to West Coast. It's just whether it's a free agency or a trade, which again, it's hard to tell there because we don't know what the AFL want to do in terms of diluting the Oscar Allen compensation pick. And then also a couple other plays that have been mentioned are the likes of Zane Dersma. He officially won't be leaving in 2025. However, the door is still open for him next year. Wade Dirksen is one that won't be heading off to Melbourne at the moment, given they're getting in Brody Myercheck, which has been confirmed. Sam Draper also officially heads over to the Brisbane Lions now, and that gives them pick 20 in exchange, which I think is probably about fair. There's no real other updates on anyone else that I know of, so that pretty much wraps up this video. As I mentioned before, please like the video and hit the subscribe button if you do enjoy these types of videos and enjoy my content. I really appreciate all the support as always, but I will see you guys next time.